How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Talk4 Podcast. So excited to have you here today and show you this fantastic episode. Just want to say quickly that episodes like this one and all the ones before and the ones in future are made possible by people who subscribe. Hopefully, just like you. I'm going to ask you today if you can leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a rating, leave a like or a comment, and just support the show in the little ways that you can like that. It makes a huge difference on my end. And quickly, just want to plug as well. I've taken 30 of the best episodes of this podcast and turned them into a fantastic book that goes into 150 secrets to greatness. Each one of those 30 episodes gets crunched down into 5 of the best key takeaways from the whole talk and turns them into a fantastic book. Highly recommend you check it out. Please support the show by grabbing a copy, either a paperback or an ebook. And I can't wait to show you guys this one today. So guys, without further ado, let's get over to the episode. How's it going, guys? Welcome to episode 146 of Talk4, the Quickfire podcast, where we ask 4 great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Louis Skupien. That's me. Let me introduce our special guest for today for the second time. Kegan Smurf Gill is going to be answering a few questions today. So, Smurf, oh my God, man, I'm so glad to have you back here. Can't wait to talk about all this great stuff. But firstly, the most important thing, how you doing today, man? And welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Louis. I guess it's an honor to be back a second time, as this is doesn't happen very often on your show, but it's good to be back with you and doing well here in Northern Michigan.
Man, I mean, I have to say, often, more like never, it's happened one time for T-Mac, who was episode 1, and then he was episode 100 as well. And that was a special event. So, people on the show, they don't really get the invite back. And that's nothing against them, but I just typically don't do that. And I would be remiss not to mention before we just get into exactly who you are for the new people listening, but every single time, and I'm not going to be one of those influencers who says, oh yeah, people ask me stuff all the time. I'm not that kind of guy. But when people have asked me what has been the most impactful person on your show or your favorite episode, I get that a fair bit. I've always said it was Smurf. And I had to redo this episode and bring you back on because that story of yours, man, and everything you stand for is incredible. And I just cannot wait to introduce the new people on the show to this and give the people who listen to that first take at this, a bit more about you, man. But for the new people listening in, we have a bit of an elevator pitch. So 1 minute or 2 minutes or however long you want to take just to give people that very quick snapshot into just a bit about who you are, what you get up to, and a bit of your history. And then we're going to dig into it on the big scale, man. So yeah, fire away.
Thank you, Louis. So my name's Kegan Smurf Gill. I'm a former U.S. Navy F-18 Super Hornet pilot. In January of 2014, I was very fortunate to survive a 695 mile per hour ejection. So traveling nearly the speed of sound, I was forced to eject from a Super Hornet out over the open Atlantic Ocean. A normal ejection is incredibly violent. It'll cause compression to the spine and flail injuries. I was way outside the envelope for what's survivable, and it actually set the record for the fastest survived ejection in naval aviation history. But with that, came a traumatic brain injury, a broken neck, broken shoulder, broken arms, broken legs, extensive nerve damage, shattered, torn apart body, destroyed nervous system. And I plummeted in the icy cold Atlantic Ocean where I had a 2-hour survival being drowned alive by my parachute before rescued by a helicopter. I awoke after 2 weeks in a coma, undergoing over a dozen trauma surgeries, rebuilding my skeleton, and it didn't look like I was going to live, but eventually the lights came back on. And as I came to, it was explained to me that I had been in a high-speed ejection and I was lucky to be alive. However, there was very little chance that I would ever walk again or use my arms, and my military flying career was over. However, you want a fighter pilot to do something, tell them it's impossible. And I had a mindset shift in just that moment, which was, you want to tell me I can't do something, I'm going to prove you wrong. And it became my focus through visualization and effort every single day, consistent hard work and discipline, that after 2 years of overcoming prescription drug addiction, undergoing more surgeries, going through an investigation of my life for the mishap and loss of an $89 million aircraft, gaining a stack of medical waivers, I returned to the cockpit of the F-18 Super Hornet as an active duty F-18 pilot. And this is sort of where the happy ending Disney version of my story would be. However, that was just the beginning of my mental health struggles. as a result of the residual effects of traumatic brain injury down the course of my career, later on, I started to struggle with mental health issues. And I found myself dealing with the conventional mental health system that so many others find themselves in, and that is through the use of pills again. And after being through my hellish experience with the pain meds, I didn't want to be on any pills, but it was presented as the only way to address my PTSD diagnoses that I eventually received. And unfortunately, the real issue was an underlying traumatic brain injury. And instead of healing the physiology of my brain and addressing that physiological problem, we focused on the emotions, and that was done through masking with medications. And that eventually led to my medical retirement. I found myself living in a mental hospital, literally out of my mind, just like completely crazy, psychosis. I could not distinguish between my reality and what was actually happening in my imagination. There was no line between them anymore. But eventually I found my way, after years of struggle in the conventional VA healthcare system, dealing with severe mental health issues that just seemed to get worse and worse as the medications increased and increased. I eventually found the use of psychedelic-assisted therapy, as well as traumatic brain injury clinics and a whole realm of modalities to heal the brain and get yourself better and heal the soul. And through a 2-year transformation, I regained my abilities as a father, as a husband, as a human being, and regained a sense of purpose. It was such a wild journey that I've written a book about it called Phoenix Revival: The Aftermath of Naval Aviation's Fastest Survived Ejection, which you can see up behind me here. So please pick up a copy. There's a lot more to that story that I just summarized as quickly as I could for you, but it's been a wild journey, to say the least.
I know, and fills my heart with just absolute pride for you that you've got this far and you've done all this stuff. And I think I'd love to redirect people to that first episode where we get into the story of the ejection on a much larger scale. But today's gonna be more about what's going on now. But I feel we'd be remiss not to at least just dig into it just a little bit more on that ejection then. So if we just quickly go through, the day, the circumstances, why it happened to start with, and then just a little bit more about kind of what you remember and just that experience. Nowadays I know a lot more about jets and spoken to a few more people, so I've got a bit more of an idea of what I'm talking about with all of this stuff, and I'd love to just recount it just a little bit more and just hear it again, really, because you tell it the best out of anyone, man.
Yeah, so I showed up to the squadron this morning in January 2014, and it was just a regular busy day as a young naval fighter pilot. There's a million things going on. You're balancing a whole plethora of ground jobs along with your flying career. And I show up at the squadron that morning, and my buddy Fisty was at the duty desk. And as a joke, he had put up on the whiteboard behind him in the ready room, he put up the airspace that we were going to be utilizing that day. And he used a shark tracker app on his phone to put up all the GPS real-time locations of all these GPS tagged sharks that had been tagged for research purposes. And it just so happened on this day, directly underneath where I was going to be doing my flight that day, there was a 3,500-pound, 16-foot great white shark named Mary Lee. The water temperature that day was at 37 degrees Fahrenheit, so nearly freezing water temperatures, below freezing air temperatures, wind. Not an ideal day to be in the ocean. And we joked about that with Fisty and I said, today would be a terrible day to eject. And an hour after having that conversation, I found myself out practicing dog fighting, BFM as we call it, as you know, now that you've had some cool experiences in jets
Yeah.
yourself. But it's kind of the epitome of what people think when they think fighter pilot. You're out bending the aircraft at the edge of its performance capabilities. You're under a lot of physical stress. It's like doing a high intensity interval training exercise. Your body under heavy G load now weighs 15 or 1,600 pounds. Your head in your helmet now weighs 150 pounds. So you can imagine trying to move your head around and operate an aircraft with that kind of stress on your body. Meanwhile, you're playing four-dimensional chess at nearly the speed of sound. So there's a lot going on. You're flying an aircraft. You're talking on the radios. You're oftentimes dealing with formation. You're dealing with another aircraft that you're trying not to run into. You're operating weapon systems, defensive systems. There's a lot going on, and it can cause a helmet fire. But we had done several rounds of this fighting through the day, which was one of my absolute favorite skill sets that we got to do in the Super Hornet, which is sort of the jack of many trades, although master of none. We get to do a little bit of everything in that aircraft, but that was one of my absolute favorite things to do, was to fight that jet, dogfight style in BFM. Well, we got to the end of our flight. We hit Joker fuel, meaning we had just enough fuel left to knock out one last short fight. And so we set up a little bit lower and quite a bit faster than we typically would, as we're kind of pressured with that time and restriction of the airspace, and call the fights on. Now, normally this wouldn't be a factor to start at the altitude and airspeed we did. As we met at the merge, with the distraction of my new Gehemix helmet, which is this really cool space age helmet that I just gotten qualified with, I didn't quite fully realize the airspeed that I'd gotten up to at this merge. As typically, we're not at that high of a speed at the merge. Now we're up at 12,000 feet when we started this fight, which is over 2 nautical miles straight up in the sky. And at that merge, we were at 10,500 feet. Normally, to do a vertical maneuver in the Super Hornet takes about 5,000 feet of airspace. I rolled the aircraft inverted, thinking I've got a little bit of room to stay above our hard deck that's set at 5,000 feet for training, just in case there is some sort of emergency or something unexpected happens. And so I maneuvered the aircraft nose low in a dive, again, not fully realizing the airspeed I was at that merge. And as I hit bullseye nose low, the aircraft hit what is called the G bucket. The aircraft thought that there were bombs on the wings that weren't actually there. And so it restricted the amount of force I could turn the aircraft with. So I went from a nice 7.5 G pull. I can feel that force of 1,600 pounds of body weight, 150 pounds on my head, all of a sudden ease up. So it was like going around a sharp corner in a sports car and then having the steering wheel kick back halfway. Only instead of skidding off the road, I'm stuck in a dive at the ocean. And this all happens extremely rapidly. The way I knew something was wrong was all of a sudden I just felt the jet settle. I'm pulling the stick in my lap, commanding the jet to pull as hard as it can, and it's not. This is a condition called out of control flight, when the aircraft is not responding to your control inputs. And within a few seconds, the ocean was rushing up, filling the canopy. 2 seconds before impacting the ocean at nearly 700 miles per hour, I opted to eject with no other option. So the things that caused this mishap, a number of factors. The setup was non-standard. My decision to go nose low at a higher than recommended airspeed was a factor. This G bucket system in our aircraft, which is there for a good reason. However, it can cause an insidious onset of a turning limitation, which has killed and caused mishaps to aviators prior to me that were much more experienced. And I know a Top Gun graduate that after my mishap had the same system kick in as he was doing a low level through a canyon and smacked into the side of a canyon wall as the system overrode. Most Generation 4 and Generation 5 aircraft communicate with the ground proximity warning system that's tied into that same G limiting function, so that if it detects, the aircraft has the ability to detect a pending collision. However, there's no communication between that and the flight control system in the Super Hornet. But a lot of other Gen 4, and I think every Gen 5 aircraft out there pretty much, if it detects a pending collision, it'll override that G limiting function. Like the F-22 Raptor, I think will even, if it detects a pending collision, it'll actually override the pilot's controls and it'll pull like 10 Gs to pull out if it needs to. The Super Hornet unfortunately doesn't have that ability, and so it's led to many mishaps. So there were several factors all kind of combined to make this worst case scenario come to life.
Yeah.
And as I talked about earlier, punching out of that speed just was devastating. Ripped my body apart, shredded open my dry suit, ripped off my helmet, and just about everything that could fail did fail. My parachute system that's supposed to disconnect malfunctioned and didn't disconnect. And with my arms completely worthless and broken and destroyed with a broken neck, paralyzed, just flailing around in the water, I had no ability to reach up and disconnect the coke fittings manually. So the parachute that had just barely saved my life then sunk under that ocean swell and started to drag me under. And for anybody who's ever been held under by a wave when you need a breath of air, say out surfing or whatever, someone holds your head under the water against your will,
Hour and a
That's
half
a
of that.
terrible feeling.
Yeah.
And that was just where I hung out for about 2 hours awaiting rescue. And my beacon malfunctioned. My helmet had ripped off my head that has the reflective tape. All the signaling equipment and radio had ripped off of my vest. I had ejected so fast. It just shredded my equipment off of me. Not that I even had the ability to use it with my arms completely destroyed. But I was just a little dark head, oftentimes underneath the surface of the ocean as I was dragged beneath, that people were looking for. And miraculously, eventually, a Navy H-60 Seahawk helicopter arrived on scene. The rescue swimmer Cheech was able to get in and cut me free of all the paracord that was tangled around me and get me into that helicopter into a level 1 trauma center in Norfolk, Virginia, where I underwent all these surgical procedures. When I arrived at the hospital, my core body temperature was at 87 degrees Fahrenheit. So I should have been dead from hypothermia, but the hypothermia actually saved me from bleeding out. And, I went through all these surgeries, came to, and was told I would never walk again, and I eventually proved all the folks wrong.
Yeah.
But really, it was miraculous what my body could heal through. But the real miracle in my story is how much the human mind can endure when given the right healing modalities. We see people struggling mentally, and they get labeled with a diagnosis of something that's uncurable, and they spend the rest of their life taking pills, struggling with mental health. And really, if you address it properly by healing the brain, by rebuilding, your lifestyle to support things that help your body and mind heal and rejuvenate, prioritizing sleep, nutrition, exercise, getting outdoors, building community with friends, family, and getting involved in something that you enjoy outside, uh, your mind and your body can heal through dang near anything when it's given the right conditions.
And there's so much to dig into there on that. So many things to dig into. I think one of the very first things I wanted to ask, just out of a bit of trivia, do you know or remember which rescue wing it was that actually saved you? Because I have spoken to a couple, I've got some projects coming up, and I was wondering if one of them is one of those.
Yeah, it was HSC 28 out of Norfolk, Virginia.
Oh man, no, I don't know those ones, but the work they do, these rescue wings, is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the response time, finding you, and getting you to back to where you are. Then from that, I mean, just incredible service from those people. And I'm pretty sure you have some great memories actually of those guys too. You still keep in touch with them, right?
Yeah, yeah, those guys, they came and visited me when I was in the hospital all banged up. And but I've kept in touch with Cheech in particular, the rescue swimmer. He's actually now a Marine Corps, or not Marine, Army sniper.
Wow.
So he actually switched over from the Navy and decided to stop rescuing people and shoot them instead. So
Man, that's a great story. So someone I had on the show a little while ago, I've had a few people on the show who've had serious injuries, mostly from combat and things that have happened to them, which are just, almost a kind of like your stories, just incredible stories of adversity and overcoming them and getting to this stage here. And one of them, Mark Ormrod, triple amputee veteran from the UK, got blown up by an IED and declared dead. Just all sorts of stuff. It's a great episode. Anyway, he's actually a good friend too. Anyway, about him, he actually remembered everything. He remembered the explosion, very confused, didn't know really what happened, and came to this shocking realization. What was it like for you? Do you remember the ejection, or was it just blackout straight away? Yeah, talk to me about that.
yeah, as far as a memory of the ejection, I remember up until that moment where the ocean was just rushing up at me and my stomach sank, and it was that oh shit feeling of dread, just complete dread and overwhelming dread. At that point, I don't have any linear memory. It was like my instincts just took over. I don't even remember putting my hand on the ejection handle, but my body just instinctively assumed the position and pulled that handle. But from that point on, uh, it was very nonlinear memories. I've gotten a lot of stuff back that happened in the ocean through the form of night terrors, which wasn't the most pleasant way to remember a lot of that stuff. That the sensation of being drug underneath the ocean, inhaling salt water, aware that there's a shark and I'm bleeding out, like this 16-foot great white shark's going to come finish me off at any second. So I remember a lot of that emotional stuff through nonlinear flashbacks. But my next linear memory was actually being transferred from Norfolk General. I came to after a surgery very briefly after being in a coma for a week. And then I saw the flight surgeon that was with me there as she was helping to wheel the gurney that I was on as they transferred me to the Naval Hospital from the Level 1 Trauma Center. And then I was back out again. And
Yeah.
then my next linear memory was being waking up in the ICU room, just very confused, having no idea where I was or why I was there. It was like waking up from a dream, except for some reason, there's all these people in my bedroom and there's these beeping machines, and I'm covered in all these sticky things, and I'm vacuum sealed all over my body and I can't move. Oh, it's because I'm paralyzed. And so it took a long time for my brain to start working between the pain meds and the head injury. I was pretty out of it for months, really. But as far as remembering a lot from the ejection after I pulled the handle, most of that has been recreated through the investigation that went on afterwards, recovering the aircraft data recorder, talking to all the individuals who were involved in the rescue. So we've been able to rebuild everything that's happened very accurately.
So since that day where you pulled that ejection handle and you hit the water and you were bobbing around for 2 hours in freezing cold shark infested waters awaiting rescue, I got to ask the question then, because I never got to the back end of it really, I don't think, in the first episode that we did. But when was the first time you had a peaceful night's sleep since then? So, what was the first time back to actually feeling like yourself again? When was that first night of feeling peaceful and starting that recovery journey for you?
I was on so many medications, at least initially, that I didn't like I was not sleeping naturally. Between the oxycodone, OxyContin, and gabapentin, and tramadol, and trazodone, and all the other stuff that they were giving me, I was basically just getting knocked out every night through medication. So I was kind of it seemed like peaceful sleep to me. It was not restful sleep.
Yeah.
It was a drug-induced form of unconsciousness. But eventually, as I was recovering and I weaned myself off of those medications for a while there, I was sleeping peacefully. I was feeling good. I was, exercising, and I got back my physicality really well, surprisingly. Um, but then as time went on, I started to have this sort of there was this underlying turmoil that started to surface its head more and more often. And that led to, I had a flight in the aircraft where they suspect there was a decompression of the cockpit, which had been happening to the F-18 community fairly regularly, actually, to the point that they had started to put hyperbaric treatment facilities on the aircraft carriers to treat pilots coming back with decompression sickness.
Wow.
But it's suspected that I had a similar event in my aircraft that kind of threw all this into turmoil. It was like adding insult to injury of my brain injury. And basically what that is if you change the pressure too rapidly, the nitrogen can come out of solution in your blood and form little bubbles. And those little bubbles can get in your joints, and it's very painful. Like divers are familiar with the bends or type 1 DCS. Now, if those little bubbles block the blood flow to your brain, it can cause brain injury, it can cause stroke, aneurysm-like symptoms, and that's suspected what happened to kind of trigger things and really push me over the edge to the point where I became very hypervigilant and paranoid. I couldn't sleep anymore at all. Like I became fully insomniac, like no chance of sleep, and going months and months without any restful sleep really took a toll on me,
Yeah.
just like it would anybody. Even just about 3 nights without sleep, and things start to fall apart. And a perfectly healthy person, if you're deprived sleep for about 2 or 3 nights, you will start to experience likely visual and auditory hallucinations, delusional thinking. And now, if that gets exacerbated over the course of weeks to months, things can really start to fall apart big time. And that's where I found myself struggling with persistent insomnia for months and months. And really, all that they did was throw pills at it that would again knock me out into this unconscious drug-induced form of unconsciousness, but it wasn't restful sleep. and my body and brain were not healing anymore. And as time went on, it just got worse. And so my body would adjust to the medications and they'd throw more pills at it. But in that time, I was dealing with the nightmares and the night terrors. And when I could get to sleep, it was not pleasant. Um, but eventually, uh, largely through, I think, the psychedelic assisted therapy is what really reset my ability to sleep.
Yeah.
After I weaned myself off all of those medications that I was giving for PTSD and insomnia, I finally had a clear mind again. And once I had kind of reset my nervous system and my soul through this heavy duty psychedelic experience with ayahuasca, I actually started to get natural sleep again.
Yeah.
And that was followed on through traumatic brain injury clinics where I was actually given lab work to analyze where my physiology was off. I was given a number of different nutraceutical supplements that helped to heal my deficits. And over the course of a couple of weeks at a TBI clinic, and then another month of doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy down in Austin, Texas, I really started to regenerate my brain. And that inflammation was able to decrease. I was giving my body good foods, good fats, things like a high quality omega-3 fish oil, uh, and other things like that, eating really well, prioritizing sleep, getting outside, exercise, all these things in combination uh, created the environment for my brain to heal. And here I am again articulating what's happened to me. And I was at a state where I was, literally living in a mental hospital, could not read a paragraph without forgetting it, incapable of doing something as simple as doing the dishes at home, and on the verge of losing my family, losing my kids, my wife, because I was just completely broken. But I'm just here to say if you can come back from that, I'm not anything special. You can do this too. So whatever dark place you find yourself in and whatever you're struggling with, know that your body and your mind can heal. You're made of cells. Your brain is made of cells. When you do the things to reduce inflammation and restore through prioritizing sleep and all these things I'm talking about, um, it's really miraculous what the human body and spirit can endure.
Yeah. If you had to rank those things and what you felt like had the biggest effect, because I'm not just talking about the kind of physical things you can do, so sleep and what you put in your mouth and stuff, but also things like positive self-talk. I mean, I've heard a few people recently who've spoken on the fact that they've actually been super uber positive to themselves and their own inner dialogue and stuff, and they've found that that's had an effect. And just wondering if you could kind of rank, what you felt, because you were at the very, the worst of where you could be in terms of in a recovery point of view from all sorts of aspects, and you managed to go from there to here. So people who are in, even 20% of where you were or 10% of where you were, what are some of the most important things you found that had the biggest effect there? So I know you mentioned obviously some of the big ones there. We all know sleep and diet are big, but anything else that is less looked at maybe?
Yeah, I think there's a conscious decision that was made, but both in my physical recovery when I was, trapped, paralyzed, and they'd said I would never walk or use my arms again, and I decided to say, no, I'm going to. And what I did is I visualized that. It was a mindset shift. I had this big flame of raging inferno of all the dark, terrible stuff that was going on in my life. My body was destroyed, my brain was destroyed, my career was over. I'm going to be investigated. Like all this stuff was just crushing me. And I had every opportunity to just bite off on that big raging inferno of negativity and pessimistic outlook. And I could have just drowned myself with the drugs and gone the path that a lot of people do when they get in that situation. But I also had this little tiny spark of, well, what if I do get better? What if I get to come into this hospital with my wings on my chest again in my flight suit and I'm walking and talking and flying jets again? What's that going to be like? And that's the little ember that I chose to fuel. And I fueled it by, well, what if I can get better? What's it going to look like? What's it going to be like to get back in the jet? Visualizing it first, and then applying consistent effort towards that goal. So you can visualize something and then not do anything to work towards it, and it's not going to happen. But every day I focus my energy and my effort on what can I do today to get better? Maybe I can't sit up and walk today, but what can I wiggle? And I'm going to work as hard as I can at doing that consistently. And every day doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to have dark moments, but when you get the chance to latch off onto that positivity and the optimism, do it and fuel that. And before long, that little tiny ember had turned into a little fire, and that big raging inferno of darkness had sort of settled itself out. And over time, as I fed that through my consistent efforts, discipline of working at my goal, and that mindset of I can do it, I'm going to close my eyes and visualize it. You can pray, you can meditate, whatever you're into. Take a moment, because the mind is the most powerful thing. And I don't think most people realize the immense power of the mind when you combine it with the discipline and effort in this physical reality to work towards whatever your mind is set on. And that was something that got me physically back flying jets. And then it was also that same little spark of hope that I held on to, even in the darkest moments, even though I was living in a mental hospital, about to lose my family. Like, I still had a hope of what if I can find something to get better? And that's what led me to research on my own and break away from the mainstream and go against what the doctors were telling me and say, no, that's not working. And I bit off on okay, maybe there's a way. And then I found the book, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, which is all about using psychedelic-assisted therapy to treat mental health conditions. But I had a little ember of hope, even in those darkest moments. And that's what I hope I can now be for others, is I hope I can be that little bit of light for the people that are stuck in that same dark place, so that they can know you don't have to be stuck in that pit alone. There is light. You just got to walk towards it and work towards it and climb towards it. Sometimes it's going to feel like you're clawing your way towards it. But if you keep moving towards that light and you choose the positivity, when you have the attention and awareness that you get that choice in every single moment of every day, and you don't have to be perfect. But if you can consistently try to be more optimistic than you are pessimistic and choose that ember of hope, it's really amazing where that can get you.
Oh man, that is just delivered perfectly. I completely agree. And there's one thing I picked out on that too. I just want to highlight as well, just to kind of back up almost what you were saying as well. But something I heard in my tennis career, now I'm going to butcher the numbers here, but I believe it was someone told me that of what you think is possible, what you believe is your 100%, your max output, there's another 30% or maybe even 40% that's hiding under the surface there. So in terms of the capacity of human recovery and also output in terms of how much effort we can give and how hard we can work, and even for recovery's purpose or even, furthering or getting fitter and stronger. I know that ties into what you're doing now with, ultra endurance stuff, but in your experience, seeing that, what kind of degree of human potential is kind of lurking under the surface of our minds? So when people think they're going 100% or they're doing everything they can, what more do you think is still left in the tank there for people?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt that we are far more capable than we give ourselves credit for when we have the mindset to do so. And you can oftentimes push a lot further than you think, and you can get through the hardest things that you think nobody could get through just by holding on to that little bit of hope. Yeah, like as you alluded to, I've explored that in the realm of ultra endurance sports through the running and mountain biking and ultra distances. You get to that same place. You get to that same place of the body shutting down, of you thinking, there's no way I can go any further than this. My legs are locked up. I can't even stand up right now. How am I supposed to finish another 50, 60 miles of this? I'm only halfway there. Well, again, it's that same mindset of, what if I can? I'm just going to take one step. And that's really what you got to do, is just take it one step at a time, one pedal stroke at a time, one little section of the trail at a time. And that applies to our lives. Even when we get in these really dark, hard positions where we don't think we can go any further, if you just focus on taking one more step, you can pretty much always just take one more step.
Yeah, I
Just
love it,
keep
man.
following it up. and
Love it.
and and, and you'll gain momentum with it too. It'll be a grind at first. There's going to be moments where you're bonking and things aren't working and your nutrition's shit and you're dehydrated and you're falling apart and you're wobbling and you're spasming. But if you can just take one more step, refuel, take a quick breather and
I
then
like
just
it.
keep moving. That applies to life for sure.
Yeah. What did all of it do to your identity? Because I'm thinking about this and I just think, yeah, walking past you on the street, you'd never know what it was you went through and stuff. And if you invited someone around your house and they didn't know, they'd never really guess it. But I just wonder, after that kind of a thing, going back to normality, what was it like for you, sort of knowing that you'd been through that and just trying to get back to normal, feel normal? Did you have a lot of trouble with doing that, or did you not really think about that too much? Because I guess you've had all of that experience and all of that went on, but people wouldn't know it unless they knew. So I don't know, how does that affect you?
Yeah, I mean, at first, like after I, started to come back to get back to flying, it was really it was a powerful experience that I was like, well, if I can get through that, I can get through anything. Um, but at the same time, I'm a pretty unassuming appearance kind of guy. I'm a whole 5'6.5", tall. Like I'm not a big dude, and people oftentimes, you know, they have no idea that I've been through all of this. And it's actually kind of funny how it can catch people off guard when I open up about my story, or they see some of the scars on my arms and legs and they're like, dude, what happened to you? Um, but as far as an identity goes with it, I did have some struggles for a while as I was going through those mental health challenges, as I was going through a medical board to be medically retired from the military, and I was losing my identity that I had, I'd worked so hard to become a naval fighter pilot. And then I had to work my way all the way back over the course of 2 years and regaining the function of my body and my mind to do so again. And then I just got kicked in the balls again with the mental health struggles that I found myself dealing with the brain injury, and things that just weren't getting better with time. They were getting worse. And that was really hard at first because I really thought the way that the mental health community kind of presented it was this is all just an emotional thing within you. And it's not. It was, the physiology of my brain was actually damaged, which was causing the chaos. But at the time, that's not how it was presented. And so I beat myself up into a really bad place because I was like, how can I get through so much? And now this little mind thing is messing with me. And I didn't understand it. I thought it was just this emotional thing I needed to bury down deep and get over, which was obviously not the right answer. But that was a really hard time, a transformation for me, where I was losing my identity as a naval strike fighter pilot, and now I was a mentally disabled individual living in a mental hospital. That was some dark times. I
Yeah.
kind of lost myself and I lost my purpose. That was something that I'd worked on my entire adult life to do, and now it was gone. And that was incredibly depressing. And I was pretty suicidal for a while. And I felt I had let everybody down that believed in me to get back flying. And how can I not just get over this little thing in my head? Um, but
Yeah.
eventually I found a new purpose. I found, I think the psychedelic assisted therapy helped me reconnect with that and see that there was value to what I've been through. By being through these hardships and these dark periods, it allows us to cultivate the best within ourselves. And if we don't face challenges in our life, we really never get the chance to bring out the best of who we are or learn who we really are. Because it's in those moments of darkness and weakness and challenge and fear that we really get to cultivate who we are.
Yeah.
And we're not always perfect, and sometimes we fail at that, but we learn through it and we can grow out of it. And now I have a newfound purpose that I think is even more important than what I was doing in my service in the military, which is to try to raise other people up that are going through the same hardships. And we have I mean, it's an epidemic in our world right now. So many people are dealing with health issues, with mental health issues, and struggling in silence. And oftentimes these wounds are the most challenging because you can't even see them, and oftentimes we are led to think that it's just something in our head that we should just be able to get over. But I want to let people know that there's a way out of that, and it's not just in your head. It's a physical thing is wrong with your brain. It's brain dysfunction, but it can be healed. And so that's my new purpose and my new identity is as a father, as a husband, as somebody who can help lift others up that are struggling. Um, That's a great
Mark,
question. No,
um,
thank you.
Mark Ormrod had a good one. He had a golden nugget for us. Positivity in the face of adversity. Did you find that positivity and even to some degree a bit of humor maybe even helped in that recovery too? Or was the whole thing just as grim as it sounds like it would have been?
No, there was definitely some lightness to it. There was actually some fun in the psychoses that I was experiencing. Like sometimes they were pretty dark, but sometimes it was really exciting, like thinking I was a superhero with superhuman abilities. And so there's some kind of funny stuff with that.
Let me
Like
guess,
my
you could
wife,
fly.
I never thought I could fly, but I did think I was getting superpowers. Like I would look at road signs and the letters would scramble and there'd be secret messages in it for me. Like there was some bizarre stuff that happened. But yeah, there having a sense of humor through it is crucial. Like in any sort of heavy duty role in the military, you're going to find people with really morbid senses of humor because you need that to survive when you're dealing with that level of stress and that close to death and chaos on a daily basis, where you're constantly pushing to the extremes. You're going to find humor. You got to, or otherwise you're going to break. So definitely humor has been a good tool. Keeping a lightness about it, laughing at yourself, laughing at the absurdity of whatever you find yourself in can be incredibly therapeutic.
So true. Oh man, I really appreciate the insight there. So, right, let's get into what you're doing now then. So, first bit, I want to dig into the ultra endurance stuff. So, ultra endurance athlete, motivational speaker. I mean, ultra endurance, very tough stuff. But I got to ask then, so your recovery process, things that you dealt with, the way you dealt with them, the things and the lessons that you found within all of that. Have you found that a lot of that's helped you in these situations too, where you're trying to go through these uber demanding challenges? Any golden nuggets there from that recovery process that you felt got you through some of those really, really rough challenges and stuff? Yeah, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I endured through my recovery was absolutely translated over to the world of ultra endurance sports very well. That mindset, because the mindset's what it's all about. And even with the messed up body, with the nerve damage I still have, with that mindset, I was able to train my body to the best of my abilities. And then I had that mindset to get me through those really hard points and those challenges when my body was shutting down and failing and hurting and spasming. But it was absolutely like it couldn't be better training to become an ultra endurance athlete than going through all the hardship that I had leading up to that. Absolutely was a good training tool for it.
I can imagine, yeah. So last time we dove into the recovery in depth, man, and this time I want to ask something as well. Then, so this is kind of a big question, but what has been the most significant change in your life since embracing the mindset of not just surviving but thriving? Then, so I guess how has it affected your day-to-day life and long-term goals, especially? So, since all of that, what's been the biggest change, I guess, or the biggest thing that's helped you go from just getting better to now, absolutely kicking ass, basically?
Yeah, I would say having stillness and being present are probably the two most daily useful things. Just giving yourself time and space to breathe, allowing things to slow down and not always just be chasing. And and you can still work towards goals and you can work hard, but it doesn't have to be this panicked struggle. Um, so that's been a very valuable thing, just that mindset shift of I spent so much of my life like constantly striving and pushing myself to the extreme and being so proactive and like constantly like out to get it. And I think I still have that a little bit, but I'm doing it in a much more sustained pace. And I'm able to breathe and I'm able to be present in the moment, which I've developed through a mindfulness practice through meditation and breath work that allows me to just to be align my attention and my awareness so that I'm fully present in what I do, even if it's not a great moment. Just be there in the moment, not stressing about what's happened in the past, not anxious about what's coming in the future, but just if we can be in the moment, you do a much better job at anything that you're trying to work on when you can be present in the moment with it. But to do so, there's been a whole wide range of things that are really valuable in my day-to-day life that help me to optimize my health, which is at a foundation. And the most important thing that anybody does is the sleep. You got to get 7.5, 8 hours of sleep every night. And if you start to reduce that, you're taking out of your bucket, and it might not bite you in the ass initially, but over time, that's going to take a toll on you. It's going to accelerate your aging. It's going to accelerate disease, and it's not allowing your body to recover in the way that it needs to. It's not allowing your mind to recover, your brain to heal. And over time, you're going to start to take damage when you don't prioritize sleep. And it's got to be restful sleep. It's got to be to where you're actually sleeping deeply. That's where your brain heals. But things that you can do that are also conducive to your sleep are, as we mentioned, the nutrition, drinking clean water, getting exercise of some sort without overdoing it. You don't need to boost your cortisol levels over the roof, because that can disrupt your sleep just as much as not exercising.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really this whole picture of lifestyle that facilitates becoming the best version of yourself. There's not just some easy button that you get to press and say, oh, this is the one thing that will make it all work. It all works together. It
Yeah.
really does.
So here's a good one then. So you may have seen that I'm working as a personal trainer now. So I train people for, basically a living. And one of the questions that I get so much, and there is so much just polar opposite opinions on the internet, and so many people saying different things. But if we talk about nutrition, so I actually probably trust your opinion more than some nutritionists on Instagram, because I know that you were seeking the answers for yourself and you've gone through the healing process. So I really value your opinion on this. But if we talk about diet and the food that we should be eating, so let's say anti-inflammatory was a massive one for you. What does that look like then? Because I've heard people say go plant-based because the meats and red meats especially are very inflammatory. I've also heard people saying that the vegetables and the greens and stuff are, we're not meant to have that, and actually people go to this carnivore diet where they just stick predominantly with that, and they have great effects. And some people who I follow have almost reversed some of their ailments. Personally, I've always found that it's somewhere in the middle, maybe 2 days on the red meat and the rest of it maybe plant-based or something, and getting that mix of the both. So what's your take on all of it? Where do you stand in it, and what did you find worked for you?
Yeah, I've tried a lot of things to see what worked best for me, which is an important part of it, is see what works for you, what you value. But if anything, just know it's just got to be real whole foods. When you eat real whole foods that are as close to the natural version as possible, as minimally processed as possible, is typically better. And while I agree, if you eat, depends on the source of your meat. If you're eating, industrial raised pigs and cows that have just been shoved into a dark hole their whole lives, that have been eating all sorts of nasty junk and pumped full of antibiotics, and you're eating a sick animal that's been eating grains that it's not designed to digest, yeah, that changes the fat content of that animal, and it's going to make you sick. And it's supporting a pretty dark industry that's, kind of torturing animals in a way that I think is not something I want to support. But I am a hunter. I like to hunt, and I'm as humane as possible the way I hunt. So I practice my marksmanship. I know my weapons so that I can put that animal down very quickly. But that's a good way to get meat into your diet. That's very healthy. Animals that have been living a good, healthy life and have lived a full life, that you can selectively pick, I think is a very humane and positive way. Also supporting local farmers. There's oftentimes farmers within your area, depending on where you live, that you can find that raise their animals. They actually live outside and eat grass and do the things that animals are supposed to live and have a good life, but before they're consumed. And I think that's important. But
Are
as far
you
as the
Yeah, go on
go
then.
ahead.
I was going to ask if there's any supplements too. So I know I've always heard that people say you can't supplement a good diet. It sounds like if you've got your diet down to a T, you've got the right sources going and stuff. But do you also take supplements too? I know quite a few people who, for example, really go to like the turmerics and the ginger roots and things like that because they're very anti-inflammatory. So, do you supplement that diet at all as well? Any big ones there that you think people should be taking?
Yeah, I largely try to get as much nutrition as I can from eating a whole foods diet through, eating good animals, healthy animals, eating, healthy eggs. I have my own chickens in our backyard, so we can go out there and get super
Nice.
healthy eggs from happy chickens that have been running around eating all the bugs. Um, I eat a lot of as much as possible organic produce, um, or farm grown from the farmers market produce from places that I know aren't dousing their soil in in chemical herbicide pesticides that just destroys the micronutrient content of the soil. But if you're stuck eating a lot of industrial processed or industrial grown like GMO crops that's not organic or not from a farmer that you trust, you're likely eating food that is very nutrient void because there's all these little micronutrients in the soil, all these little microorganisms are providing essential things that our body can't produce when we consume that kind of vegetable or plant or whatever it may be, fruit. Um, and so a lot of people are eating their fruits and vegetables, but they're getting a tiny portion of the nutrients they actually need. And over time, your cells are trying to basically spell out a whole volume of encyclopedias, but you're missing multiple letters from your alphabet. So over time, maybe it's just a few words get misspelled, but over time, now you have books and books and volumes of your body that are not built correctly because your body's not getting what it needs. And it causes all sorts of disease and problems down the road where your body just starts to fall apart. And so oftentimes supplementation is required, and even eating as whole foods of a diet as I eat from as good a sources as I can find. I still do supplement a few things. Now, I do like to take one called vitamin DAKE. It's a combination of D, A, K, and E that are in the proper ratios together. I also supplement a minerals supplement just to get enough minerals because I exercise a lot. It can kind of deplete my electrolytes, and by taking a mineral supplement, it helps to restore that. I use creatine, which I think has multiple benefits. I've heard about 12 grams a day is really excellent for people that are active, especially for brain health in particular, but it also helps keep your muscles hydrated. That helps your muscles function better and prevent injury. I oftentimes take like a daily green supplement. There's a number of makers out there that have them, from Athletic Greens. Thorne has a good one. I think Jocko started making one. There's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah.
But those are some easy ways to get, and you can go all day on supplements and deep
Yeah.
dive. If you're dealing with some sort of brain health issue, I highly recommend getting on high levels of omega-3s. So fish oil, there's a company called Nordic Naturals that makes an ultimate omega supplement. And that's something that I highly recommend if you're dealing with any sort of mental health condition, is working yourself up to about 3,000 milligrams a day of a high quality fish oil. And it's really got to be a high quality one because a lot of the fish oils out there are going to be loaded with heavy metals. And unless they go through a special process to remove that, you're going to actually be poisoning yourself from a lot of the store-bought fish oils that are out there. There's a really good product made by Dr. Mark Gordon, who's been on the Rogan podcast, I think 6 times at this point. He makes one called Brain Rescue 3 that has everything you need to heal your brain all in one. It comes in these little packets. They're a little more pricey, but you also are getting like basically every supplement you need in one little packet per day, which is kind of handy and convenient for somebody if you don't want to have to think about it. But yeah,
Nice.
supplementation, you can also injure yourself with supplementing things, over supplementing things. So it's best to do it with some sort of lab work in conjunction with somebody who knows how to read that lab work. So if you can find a naturopath doctor or functional medicine doctor that can actually do some labs with you before you just start taking all these supplements willy-nilly, you can oftentimes help yourself out. But I will say with supplementation too, that's just like that's such a tiny piece of it, and I wouldn't even worry about supplementation until you've really prioritized the sleep and the nutrition and the
Yep.
hydration and the exercise and the nature. If you're not doing all that stuff first, supplements you're just wasting your money on. Supplements can help in little tiny ways, like get you that next little level. And maybe if you have a massive deficit in something, it can help you feel a little better. But the supplements are just kind of like icing on the cake, you know. And
Yeah.
you can injure yourself with them. So be careful.
I like that advice, man. That's solid. And just quickly, what about the exercise then? Are you just doing kind of what you want to do with that? So is it kind of like a personal new to you challenge getting into the ultra stuff? Or is there specific benefits health wise that you're looking for by doing that sort of training modality? So are you doing that for a certain reason for your recovery and health that you've discovered, or is that predominantly just because, hey, Smurf wants to go and ace this because he's recovered from this and now look what I can do? So yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, you know, I pursued the ultra endurance world for a few years after my recovery and like, you know, as I started to heal from all the mental health stuff side of things and the physical. And I really needed to prove to myself that I could still do something like that. And so that was a mental challenge to myself. I looking at it retrospectively, I'm not sure that was the healthiest way to train. Dealing with elevated cortisol and a lot of the things I was dealing with, like exercising is intently. I mean, I was on a full-time training plan. I was working out 6+ days a week. I was doing like 5 or 6 hour training sessions as I trained for that ultra endurance world. I have since shifted my trajectory and my focus. I got into jiu-jitsu over the course of this past year, and now I've become very focused on flexibility, strength. I'm now doing a strength training protocol. I do yoga and stretching, and then I try to do jiu-jitsu a few nights a week. And that's been a massive shift from the ultra endurance world. And while I enjoyed that and it was a good challenge, I now find myself getting stronger and more robust, more flexible, and also being able to do so without spiking my cortisol the way I was when I was pushing myself at such a high extreme.
Yeah.
Which I think there's benefit to doing that on occasion, but if you're trying to recover and your sleep's jacked up, if you're really pushing yourself on the extreme edge of exercise, you're likely boosting your cortisol in a way that's going to inhibit proper sleep. So, you know, I've since shifted. I enjoy doing it for a bit, and maybe someday I'll pick up that ultra endurance itch again. But for right now, I've shifted to more of a different training protocol to build strength, longevity, flexibility, and just have a really healthy, strong body.
Nice. All right, man. Well, we're gonna transition into the shameless plug stuff here now, but there's two big things I want you to hit on here. So we're gonna kind of extend this section a little bit. So number one, last time we spoke, I think towards the back end of that podcast, I surmised that whole talk by saying, "Oh my God, Smurf, you should write a book." And I think that's quite funny because actually you were what, like halfway through writing that book at that time when I said that. So got that one right. And it's out and it's done really well. So what I'd love you to do is just kind of plug the book a bit. So tell us a bit about it, what it covers, what that process of making it was like, and where we can find it. And then kind of, you know, tie a bow on it by telling us a bit about the public speaking as well. So where can we find that, and does that kind of tie into the book stuff too? So yeah, those two big ones. Let's start there with it.
Yeah, so yeah, when we did our episode last, I can't remember exactly where I was, but I think I was working on the original manuscript. So I had like a rough draft that I was building of this book. And it took about 9 months to write that full manuscript, which was very therapeutic, you know, getting to the place to explain my experiences in very vivid detail and painting that picture emotionally for what I was going through to the reader really made me sit down and face a lot of challenging stuff along the course. And, you know, today we really kind of brushed on everything very briefly. There's much, much more to this story that you'll find in the book. But the book is called Phoenix Revival, and it's the aftermath of naval aviation's fastest survived ejection. And you can find it on Amazon. You can get it in hardcover, paperback, ebook, and on Audible. I do the voice for the Audible, and people have been really, the feedback has been phenomenal. And for marketing it on a shoestring budget, it's been doing pretty darn good. And being on podcasts like this and sharing it with folks that would likely be interested helps a lot. So I really appreciate it, Louis. But it's also led to some speaking engagements over the past 2 years. I've spoken at a wide variety of different venues, from nonprofit fundraisers, universities, high school commencement ceremonies, mastermind retreats, corporate events, and a little bit everything in between. So if you're looking for a motivational speaker that is sure to wow your audience with a very authentic story and message, please look me up. My website is kegangill.com. That's KEGANGILL.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Kegan Smurf Gill. I've got a pretty good profile on there with a bunch of different videos for anybody who wants to check that out. And then the other big thing that I'm working on right now is I just started working with what's called the Davis Hope Project. And I'm describing this very long, drawn out, elaborate route that I've taken back to health. And what the Davis Hope Project does is it can take anybody into that program. It's a nonprofit organization. It's set to help veterans, is our initial goal. But it's set to take veterans from where I was at, struggling with whatever it is, and guide them through that entire process and give them access to all of these modalities in the proper order with the proper support to get people. And it's to optimize your health. So our hope is to try to help people that are potentially active duty, just like we help the veterans. We're trying to pair and work with the VA healthcare system to try to bring this to life. But it's very exciting. It's in its infancy now, but you can expect to hear more about this as it grows. But that's Davis Hope Project. I believe that's .org or maybe .com. I need to actually memorize that. But Davis Hope Project, check it out. It's the way of the future for healthcare. I really think we're on the precipice of a revolution in our healthcare system, because people have seen that the conventional system is broken and dysfunctional, and it's time for a new way ahead. And this is it. And I'm excited to be a part of it and take the hard lessons I learned and apply them to this so other people don't have to go through that struggle.
I love it. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Any final thoughts there? Anything you want to add that you didn't get to touch on today? Any last messages or anything there? Just thought I'd give you that opportunity. I know that, actually somebody asked the last guest I had on maybe an hour and a half ago or something, was just any questions that you've always wanted to be asked on a podcast but never got asked, or is there anything in there that you just want to round off with? Feel free to fire away. If not, we'll wrap it up there, man.
I really appreciate you having me on, Louis. The only things I can think of, I also just started a coaching program. So if you're looking for guidance on your own healing journey and you want somebody who's been through it firsthand who can help you, I don't have a bunch of fancy degrees, and I've learned these lessons through my life experience instead, which I think is more valuable. But I'm here to help you through whatever you're struggling with, be that mindset, be that, what path to take to get to be the optimum version, the most authentic, best version of yourself. I can help you on that journey. And to leave you with something of value, I may have even left you with this at the end of the first podcast we did, but it's a quote that I love from Carl Jung. And it's, in order to grow, to reach the heavens, we have to have roots that have been deep into hell. By experiencing hardship in our life, it's in enabling us to grow even higher and stronger. So even if you're in a dark place, stick with it. This is a chance for growth, to grow higher than you've ever been before.
Freaking love that, man. Yeah, I remember that one. That's all come back to me now. Man, yeah. Again, what a great episode. I'm full of gratitude and just so impressed and just humbled by not just everything you've gone through, but everything that you're doing now. It's really inspiring, and I hope you know that you're a true inspiration to me and a lot of people who are listening to that first episode, and a lot of people who are going to listen to this one too. So thanks, brother. Really appreciate having you on again, and I'm sure we're going to get to do this again in the future. But guys like you keep pushing. I can't wait to see where it all goes. It's phenomenal.
Thanks for your support along the way, Louis, and thank you for what you're doing to bring voices like this to everybody. It's so incredible. We're living in good times right now where people can talk about this kind of stuff in this format. It's really lifting people up.
We certainly are. We're healing, man. Guys, thank you for listening. Episode 146. If you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. And if you'd like to listen in for the future ones coming up too, make sure to hit that subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now. See you in the next one. Good night.